The opinions heard on this program, based on the many years of experience of Russ and Shannon, are offered for entertainment value only and as a guide to your repair needs. No claim to repair or cause is given or implied. Always consult with your own certified technician and follow all safety procedures before attempting any repair. To be a part of the show, call 866-594-4150. Under the Hood is produced by Prairie House Productions. All content is the property of Nordstrom's Automotive Incorporated and may not be used without our permission. Copyright Nordstrom's Automotive, Inc. Now, let's go under the hood with the Nordstrom's Motor Medics.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. We are glad to have you with us. Russ Evans is here to answer your automotive questions.
Thanks for joining us under the hood.
Shannon Nordstrom is here to do the same.
Welcome, hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter here to answer your calls at 866-594-4150. I saw some news right before I headed to the studio today.
I have some that's pretty big deal.
Yeah, I know. Mine is short. Volkswagen is recalling hundreds of thousands of SUVs for airbags that won't inflate.
That's new.
That's new. So
That's new.
Yeah.
Which models?
I
just saw the headline.
Yeah, I just saw the headline and it caught my eye. You, though, do have some news.
Well, as of, the show live recording that we're doing here on Thursdays, for those of you that are listening all over the place, 866-594-4150. You can call in on the live time. You can call anytime. But if you want to talk live, just call right in. But as of now, there is a really big issue at a huge number of dealerships across the country.
New dealerships.
New car dealerships. The software that they run their operations with is owned by a company called CDK, I believe. And CDK has had their system held for ransomware.
Oops.
And it's still going on, and it's been going on for a bit.
A bit like days or hours?
Like this whole week almost.
Okay.
And so it really cripples a big operation like that. It affects their ability to write deals on vehicles. It affects their parts departments and finding their inventory and doing all these things. And it is a good reminder. I mean, first of all, I've got a lot of friends in that industry and just so much empathy for what they're going through right now, because they are literally working by pen and paper with what they had for backup copies to know where things are at. And then when this ever comes back, which there's some predictions, but I don't know what's true and what isn't, but that will all have to be re-entered, and basically all those business days will have to be funneled back into the computer. And then you're trying to do that at a month end, and for many people at a year end. It's a big, big challenge. And so it affects the car industry as we sit here under the hood.
It affects you
in a huge way.
If you need a part ordered for your car that's a dealership part, well, maybe.
I'm looking at the news right now as we talk, and they are back up. They're trying to get everybody back online. CDK Global says some dealerships are back up after the cyber attack, hoping that many outlets across the U.S.
How recent is that story?
2 hours ago.
Okay. Because I have a text as of right now that one is still not up.
Okay.
So,
well,
but anyway, regardless, it's a big problem
that they're working there.
But it's a reminder that it can be that if you're out there listening and you're a hacker, go to
hackme.com.
But the emails that can come in that are a phishing attack that you answer not knowing where it's coming from, that could be the one that places a hook in your system that allows somebody to get in there and
don't open it and don't respond to it. Don't just get mad one day. I've been tempted sometimes when it says, "Hey, we need an order for this. Do you want to?" I'm like, "No, just go away. No, don't respond."
And Russ, I'm not sending you any any emails asking you to transfer money
to the prince and
I might
somewhere.
So if it's me,
we had this happen in that regard in our trade association. One of our accounting folks got an email from our executive director telling her to transfer money to a vendor that made sense to us in our industry, and before they caught up with it, we had already moved tens of thousands of dollars to somewhere we never got it back from.
Oops.
And it was a horrible thing, but it was so when we all looked at it. The email looked nice. as you looked at it the second time, you're like, come on, there's some bad English here.
Yeah.
But the big key for anybody listening, I'm not trying to be Kim Commando here, but if you have an email that comes to you, look up in the address bar and expose the email address. Don't just look at the alias it's showing. Expose the email address. And like in this case, it was supposed to be coming from person's name at a-r.a.org, our trade association. But when you looked at it, it was the person's name. And then once you open the alias, it was something Gmail,
Right.
Or any link ever. If you've got something that says, click on this link and you can get a free hoodie, and you hover over the link and it doesn't go to underthehoodshow.com. It's like to some blah, blah, but you're like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. HTML,
and
attachments that you get,
And now
PDFs they can do it with now.
And on Facebook, we've had them spoof our website,
Oh, yeah.
spoof our everything. So,
And it'll get worse with AI.
Well,
for sure.
Russ, they'll be able to duplicate things so well. Scary world, but I want to just like I said, a lot of empathy for our dealership friends out there that have lived through this.
And one of the things I just read about the CDK thing is that it was down long enough that it might affect the economy straight across, because so much commerce was halted during it that it will affect supply chains, and it could affect everything. So it is hopefully that's on its way back. They're working on it this morning as we are doing this, so we'll see what happens. All right, 866-594-4150. Let's go to Oklahoma and talk to Eric. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Eric, what can we do for you? Eric, are you there? Oh, hold on. I see what's going on there. No, I don't. Now let's try it. Eric, are you there?
Yes.
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I have a 2008 F450, and one of the things to be a common thing is a restricted oil cooler. I'm running about a 30-degree Delta, and what's common is about a $3,200 or higher repair. I lifting the cab and taking the engine apart and replacing that cooler. So I was going to ask your opinion about. I'm a technician, and I'm thinking about using a product that's aluminum safe to descale that oil cooler. And I just wanted to ask your opinion and what you might think about that.
Well, I guess if you want to try it, you're not out anything. But we've never seen anything do it. And in our shop, we've replaced dozens of those. We're doing one right now.
This is the 6.4 bi-turbo on this one?
Yeah, it's the 6.4 2008. And so there's a product out there that I've used before on pressure vessels, little boiler-based steamers, and it worked really well. And it's a very specific company out of Texas. And anyway, they make a product that it's not supposed to damage any rubber or seals. And my thought was drain the system down, pull the starter, drain the block.
Yep.
And add, so 1 gallon is supposed to do 1.5 kilograms of scale.
Interesting.
And I was going to add 2 gallons, 4 gallons is distilled water, and run it up to temp, and then it should do it in a number of hours, but I was going to run it to temp, cool it, run it to temp 3 times in over a 24-hour period, and then drain it, and then flush it with distilled water, and see if that drops the delta. But have you guys ever tried anything like that?
No, we don't do that. We just replace the cooler. I've had a number of customers try what they said was everything, whatever, except for this, maybe.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. Yeah,
but
this sounds
maybe not.
It hasn't worked. They've tried it, and it says it hasn't changed anything, not even a little bit. Sometimes with heater cores, they try to clean them, and you get a little more heat, but it's not sufficient. But there's a change. With this, they said they didn't see any kind of change. It still was running hot, so we just put the upgraded coolers on, like the bulletproof diesel coolers and things like that, and updated the systems to make them work. But that, it's what you're doing. Even descaling it is, if the cleaner works, that'd be great. It'll save you some money, but you're going to have a lot of labor involved to drain that block and do that. We've done a number of those to get the rust scale out of them, or we've had to pull the
Okay.
starter, drain the blocks, and it took a lot. I mean, for me, even on my own truck, I spent about 8 hours taking the starter off, draining, filling, cleaning, do it a second time, make sure it looked clean, and then putting a neutralizer in there, then pulling the starter and draining it again and putting it together. But it fixed it. It took care of my issue, which was not a cooler issue. But, the two of our guys in the shop have the 6.0s, and they've had to do the same thing. They had to run the Ford cleaner in there. But that's really, if you've got time, sometimes, time is money. But if it's your own time, it's a lot less because you're not spending the big dollars to put that cooler on there. But if you don't see the need for an updated cooler anyways on the vehicle, if it's running just fine stock, you might try the descaler and see what happens.
Well,
Okay.
let us know for sure.
Yeah, I'd like
Yeah.
a report back because then I think that we're going to want to maybe
There's others
know what
that
that product is.
Right, yeah. Eric, thanks very much for the call. Please
Works for boilers.
let us know
Yeah.
if you'd end up going that way. Let us know what happens. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you.
Free car advice. Now that's something new. This is Under the Hood.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Let's talk to John in Minnesota. John, you're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Well, good morning, guys. Say, I got a 1967 Ford Galaxie 500. It's all factory. 289, two-barrel motorcraft carburetor. I bought it on an estate auction. It's got a little over 32 rounds on it. And I put new brake lines on it, new brake hoses, that kind of thing. But it's rust-free as heck. But my problem is that puppy, boy, like if I want to go to a parade or something with it, I just painted it a week ago yesterday. And it just, when it's warm out, it just wants to stumble and die, and then it won't start unless you let it cool off. Open the hood and let the carburetor, it vapor locks so badly. And I put in so-called premium fuel at the Snuck station. That didn't make a darn better difference.
Yeah, well, if it sure sounds like it could be vapor lock if you're not getting,
Yeah.
if it cools down and then it works fine, but
Yeah, now it starts right up.
but you're positive it is fuel and not an ignition problem where it's getting hot
Nope.
and no fire.
No.
Okay.
No. And be honest with you, if you got just 1 second, I got a 72 Chevy pickup with a 402 big block in it,
Yeah.
and that's a factory engine, and that's got the factory carburetor on it, the Rochester spread bore, and that puppy does the same thing. It doesn't like warm weather.
Well, that's
So I don't know. I mean,
Sounds
I
like a
know
you
the
issue,
gas isn't
John.
like it used to be. Pardon?
yeah. You're gonna so there's ways around this. You're gonna the first thing is to find out if it is fuel, because if it's if it was ignition, that can happen too. Or if are they converted to electronic or are they points?
No. Well, the 72, the 402, that's electronic.
Okay. Well, if this 500 is still running points, you won't have a problem with the heat as long as, you could verify. You can pull the cap off and check or see if you got spark. But if you got spark and you spray some starting fluid in there and does it fire up with starting fluid and then die?
I haven't tried that,
Try that
it's
just
got
to.
the factory air cleaner and everything on it.
Okay.
But I mean, it'll wind over like crazy. And actually, if it'll start, and when it does, if it will start, you put it in gear and it dies instantly.
Okay.
But then you let it cool off, open the hood for a little while, then it starts right up and it drives like a charm.
Well, verify it's fuel first. I mean, you could try to spray some starting fluid in there. If it fires right up, then I'm sure it's fuel. But then what you're probably going to have to do is add some fuel pressure to it to avoid this problem. And with an older car like that, they just weren't made to drive in parades. They were made to drive down the road and stay cool. So what you can do, I had an old Mustang that I had a problem with. It was doing the same thing. It would vapor lock, and I had a couple 4-barrel carburetors on it, and it would, down the road, it was pretty good, but on the days we had where it would get up to 100 outside, unless I was on the highway with it, it would sometimes fall on its face, or if it shut off, it was just took forever to get the thing started. So a guy I was working for said, here, this will fix it. And we ended up getting a low pressure electric fuel pump from a Ford truck that was carbureted. And the reason they had an electric fuel pump on it, it was an 84, and they put that on there to prevent this from happening. So what it is the fuel pump goes in the back of the vehicle underneath the door, and it supplies about 4 pounds of fuel pressure. And then at the carburetor itself, a regulator is installed next to the carburetor where the fuel line goes in, and it returns everything it doesn't need back to the tank. So it's always circulating the fuel in that line, pulling out the fuel from the tank, dumping it back, keeping the line a little cooler. But the pressure is what keeps a modern car from going into vapor lock. If there's no pressure, the fuel will boil off at a certain temperature. But if you've got it under pressure, the more pressure, the longer it'll take. Just like a radiator, it's longer it takes to boil. So if you can put an electric fuel pump on both your truck,
I do
and the
have
car.
on my truck.
Now
It's under the cab.
okay, you've got to make
Yeah,
sure that you've got the right amount of pressure, because if it's got the right amount of pressure, it will not vapor lock. And you might have to play with that and adjust, because too much, it's going to make that carburetor leak, and maybe that's the problem you have, and it'll dump fuel and it'll flood out, but not enough, and it'll boil over. So, a lot of times people will use a clear fuel line at the carburetor to inspect and see what it's doing when the engine's cooler, just to make sure the flow is right and everything. But you'll have to play with that. But I think that's what you're going to end up doing on that Galaxie 500 is getting an electric fuel pump on there in order to return that fuel back to the tank and keep proper pressure up to the carburetor.
Yeah. It's kind of odd, because you think, my goodness, when they would never be able to sell those cars. If they did that all the time.
Well, they
New,
were parked. They did have problems with them when they were brand new. People would drive them, and if they tried to drive them in a parade or stop and go traffic, they would just be told. We had a lot of things with cars that we wouldn't accept today, but back then they just said it's not made to run that way.
Right.
You've got to keep going. They would say things like, "Don't let it sit and idle." If you're stopped, turn it off, and different things like that. Because like air conditioning, you couldn't sit in traffic. If you're in a traffic jam, don't sit with your air conditioning on like we do now. You had to turn the car off, roll the windows down, because it would just die.
Well, and that's also why I appreciate you wanting to keep this car stock, and it sounds like a beautiful vehicle. You probably haven't done anything to the carburetor at all.
Yeah, I put a new kit in the carburetor, and mainly, the power valves on those puppies.
Right, they all go bad.
Well, they deteriorate, Well, and then naturally, this thing has been set for many years, So I put a new kit in the carburetor, and that's rebuilt. It runs great. The automatic choke works fine, and I put valve cover gaskets in it, and like the inside of the valve cover is like brand new.
Sure. You
Rock
put a
arms,
heat
everything,
insulator under the carburetor too. They do make some heat insulators, and that could help out a little bit with this issue as well before you go changing fuel lines on it.
This is one reason, though, why a lot of the aftermarket has gotten so popular for companies like Holley and others that make simple little throttle body fuel injections and stuff to add to some of these cars. To
looks like a carburetor. It goes.
Yeah.
You take the air cleaner off. It goes underneath. So it's the same size as the carburetor. Put the air cleaner on. Nobody'd see it was there unless they looked underneath that air cleaner. And you can hide everything in the car that runs it.
But that's what a lot of people have done. If it's not a purist car, if they want it to be drivable, it's an affordable option without going out and spending tons and tons of money.
Yeah, because if you think it has to have a carburetor on it, it's a show only car. It's not going to be a driver car, because otherwise at a car show they're not going to ding you because it has a fuel injection if it's done correctly. But
We've got just a little time
All right.
left here. Both these vehicles are Berkeley Classics, and
Let's concentrate on the Galaxie here. John, you said you painted it a week ago. Is it this? Don't say what color you painted it, but is it the same? Is it the stock color?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna guess what color it is. I'm going first, and I'm gonna be right. It's blue.
it's black.
it's that maroonish color, maroonish red Ford had.
John, what color is it?
Yeah, you're kind of right. It's kind of what do they call that? A mist turquoise. Like it's a bluish.
There you go.
Yeah. All right.
And the Ford pickups in that year, '67 Ford pickups. You remember those, Shannon?
Yes.
And they were that color with the white roof.
Yeah, they're beautiful trucks, and they're bringing a ton of money right now.
Well, stay on the phone, John. In honor of Berkeley One Classics 50th anniversary, we're going to get you a free hoodie from Berkeley One Classics, and Doug's going to get your address and size on the phone here. Thanks.
That's pretty cool. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150.
My car does that thing. You know, that thing. Under the Hood has the answer you're looking for.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. You can call that number 24 hours a day and leave us a message. We'll call you back during the show. You can also watch the show on our YouTube channel. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel and sign up for the Under the Hood Show hoodie fan club at underthehoodshow.com, you could win a hoodie.
Chad Williams, congratulations from our friends over at BerkeleyOneClassics.com, celebrating their 50th anniversary, and of course, Universal Technical Institute, place to go to be trained as in the proper way to be an automotive technician. Learn about all the modern cars and the older cars as well, vintage stuff, motorcycles, ATVs.
If I go to UTI, am I going to learn about vapor lock on a 67 Ford Galaxie 500?
They will tell you what vapor lock is and what causes it, but they will also tell you this is something you don't have to worry about on modern cars. If somebody's telling you they have vapor lock, that is not the case with the modern car because of the modern fuel systems, pressurization, and all that kind of stuff. So they will teach you the basics, because there are some basics you just need to know the terminology, even if you're not a mechanic. Because if somebody comes into you and says, Chris, I need my car worked on, I think it's vapor lock. Well, if you know what vapor lock is, you can say, we'll take a look at your car, see what it is, but it's probably not that, because this is a modern car with pressurized system and it shouldn't have that occur. But if you don't know what vapor lock is, you might be going, I got to look this up.
Right.
Figure out what, it could be. We'll check that out. No, don't do that. They're really good at what they do. They run the full gamut from regular internal combustion cars, diesel, gas, electric, hybrids, everything. So you can really get trained well to do the job correctly. And there's a lot of openings for automotive technicians out there, and for good ones. And it doesn't matter, men, women, young people, older people.
Are there ones available for bad ones too? I mean, they'll
take a bad technician who wants to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I was.
But
want a good one.
You got to be willing to learn, though.
Right.
Shops don't really want a bad one.
That's
not really a good thing. But shops they're
training bad technicians regularly.
So the need for technicians is not as strong as it was a couple years ago.
Okay.
There is room for those technicians, but shops have found ways around the technician shortage. A lot of jobs, let's say we had 1,000 jobs to do across the city. They may have eliminated 300 to 400 of those just by saying, we're not going to fix that car because of the type of work it is. Or they will say something like, sure, we'll fix it, but it's going to be this much money. Do you want to fix it? And if they do, then it's worth the shop's time to do that. We're seeing all sorts of stuff like out there. Thankfully, we've been blessed with enough technicians that we can still save people money and fix a lot of cars. Because we really by far do more engine and transmission replacement than anything else, although we do everything. We do transmission repair, engine repair. We do anything from a door lock on up. We just don't do glue in glass or body work of any kind, like paint stuff. But we're doing everything else. But we really excel in engines and transmissions. So when people are needing them, they're coming from all over the place to have them installed, and we're able to save people a lot of money because we have done so many thousands of them that we know what we're doing, and I can get a really, really almost to the penny price of what typically one would cost. So we do a lot of those, but we're seeing a lot of other stuff too. But while other shops are a little slower because they're doing, like, say, brakes and shocks and tires, if the market slows down for those type of things for even a couple months when the economy goes up and down, we're still plugging away with engines. But we've had enough people to go. But yeah, I see with, as far as trained people, I think every shop could use one or two good people. But if they're not good, they're just not even going to mess with them. If they haven't been trained by like UTI, they'll just I'm not even going to
good
mess
people
with
that aren't good technicians.
That's true.
Right. Yeah.
And don't say it. If you're a bad technician, that's my career advice. Don't tell people that.
Whatever career it is you're going into.
Yeah, try and get better. Don't, let me be clear. Don't settle for bad, but don't.
Well, a lot of people
broadcast it.
won't even jump into a job because they're afraid that they might not be able to do it. When in all truth, if they go do that job, they might actually be better than somebody that's currently doing that job. Or they might have an attitude that allows them to learn quicker and do the job.
We've seen that for years. Russ has always told me about technicians that have said, I don't like Fords, or I don't like Chevys, or I don't like Chryslers. And they just they go into the job with that attitude, and it just makes it that much harder.
Mm-hmm.
It's all nuts and bolts.
Yeah. So once they realize that, like Russ just said, it's just nuts and bolts, and I got to figure out how they did it. I see that with our dismantlers too. They're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Give me another one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Got a question coming in on the chat from John. 2019 Silverado 1500. No air blowing out of the vents. Tried switching to heat and all the different positions. Still no blowing air. Thinking blower motor or blower motor control module. What do you think?
Well, if it doesn't blow air in any position at all, yeah, probably the blower's probably built up some resistance with age, so it's drawing more current than it should. It's pulling current like a big electric bathroom heater rather than a
Vent.
clock radio.
And a bathroom vent.
Right. So it's loaded up that speed control module and burned it up. That happens a lot. So if you ever have a failed blower resistor or module, it's almost always caused by
the blower motor.
The blower. So you can put a new module in, and if it fails a second time, always replace the blower. If you guess the first time and it failed again in another month or 6 or 8 months, just get a blower.
And then oftentimes it'll also be the pigtail connected to the blower motor or resistor. Yeah. Usually the resistor that gets heated up and damages that too.
Well, our partner over at Dorman Products sells not only they sell the repair parts to fix it right, where you can get the blower, you can get the blower module or resistor, but here's the important part. If you put a new blower in and you put a new blower resistor in it, but the pigtail that plugs into it, the little harness, the extension cord thing, if that is burnt or discolored or marked up in any way, that will create resistance and burn up the whole thing again. So they sell this repair kit, which comes with a number of inches of electrical pigtail and the connector and the proper crimp connectors to crimp it all together. Make sure you use the proper tool or you can build up resistance there. But if you did, in the worst case, you could cut those off and replace them again and keep the pigtail that they sell you. But make sure you replace, if you do the job right with the right parts, you're not going to have this fail quickly again. It should last at least as long as the factory. And with Dorman, they do make OEM solutions, and what that means is that they've taken a weak original part and changed it by making it stronger, heavy wire, heavier plastic, heavier metal, whatever it takes.
We've seen that. I've seen that in parts.
Yeah.
I mean, you've showed me parts on
Like
my
the
car.
Plastic oil coolers that are now
Mhm.
aluminum, or plastic intakes that are now aluminum, different things. So they make them, and like your car, the turbo, a stronger turbo with different wastegate, different bearings, so that they don't fail quickly again. There's a lot of items like that in cars that just need a little
and this is
bit.
making the assumption that the blower motor is not spinning, pushing air, because there could be other things with mode control, doors underneath the dash. But do you hear a roar or not hear a roar? If you're hearing the blower motor roar and you got no air coming out, then you got some other things we got to work on with the control motors underneath the dash, because that's all electronically controlled.
I got a fun recall for you, Chris.
Okay.
Whoo, Ford, some of the 14 F-150s, I think they were called, that's several 100,000 of them. They may just go into first gear as you're driving down the road. Hello. That'll wake you up, won't it?
Yeah.
Automatic trans just downshifts. Boom, right into. Yeah, not good.
We used to have that a lot with the GM stuff. We would get them quite often back in the what would have been the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s.
550,000 trucks in the U.S. unexpectedly downshift into first gear.
That seems bad.
Here's the kicker. No matter how fast the truck is going.
That sounds terrifying.
Have we ever had one come in like that where they popped a motor and they did that?
Oh, we've had a number.
We've put so many of those motors in. I just kind of,
we've had a number of vehicles, mainly GMs, that with the cruise set, the transmission went into neutral because the transmission had failed and the engine blew up because with the cruise set there was no RPM limiter.
That's what I was thinking of, Russ.
If it was in drive, no RPM limiter. And then we've had some other ones when they go into first gear, if the tires get a good grip, they can destroy stuff. We've had a couple of the older Fords we saw with transfer case issues. These modules were very susceptible to EM radiation and things like that. So like we had one of our employees and friends, Paul Moots, had a Ford. What was that?
97 F250 or 01 F250, the 7-lug.
Yeah, the heavy
long
half-ton.
box Calhoun's old truck.
The blue one. So he's driving it down the road out to the lake on the weekend, and we were having some pretty good thunderstorms. And it wasn't raining yet, but lots and lots and lots of lightning. And lightning had struck very near the truck, near enough that the four-wheel drive transfer case module said, "Oh, it's time to shift into four-wheel drive low," and it shifted into low going down the road, and I'd never seen
which is hard to get into low, period.
Yeah, it twisted the rear drive shaft, and then it had pieces everywhere. It was just hanging out the bottom of the truck. It just exploded. So we ended up putting a drive shaft in it and a transfer case, and then after that was put in, he had transmission shifting issues, so we ended up putting a transmission in it within a couple months, and then the rear end was making noise. We ended up putting a rear end in it too. It was quite the explosive.
I forgot all about that.
If a transmission shifts into first, is not only will the engine rev up high, but typically the rear wheels will lock up on the vehicle until the vehicle gets down to a slow enough speed that the engine can catch up with it at high RPM.
My car went from fourth to third one time instead of fifth, and scared the heck out of me.
Yeah,
and that's because you had your hand on the shifter.
I don't know what. It couldn't have been anything I did. Must have been.
This
something
is
else.
a manual trans, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it just got off. It just was kind of weird in a weird spot. I don't know what happened there. Scared me bad though.
Oh yeah, I've done it.
We're gonna take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150.
Car feeling ill? Don't want to spread it to your wallet? Call the Motor Medics now for free advice.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. Let's go to North Carolina and talk to Shiraki. You're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Fantastic.
See, my problem is I just brought a 2006 Jeep Commander. It's a V8, and every time like I can let it run for over 5 minutes, 10 minutes with just warming, and it'll idle. It'll idle. But when it goes back down to a normal idle, like 1 RPM or a little below, it stays like right at 1.5 point, and it'll idle all like loud and everything.
So it's idling when you're saying, make sure we understand, like 1,500 RPMs, 1.5 points?
Right.
All right.
It'll stay at 1,500, and then it'll drop down, and then it'll go back up to 1,500 and stay up there for about a second or two, go back down. And it'll do that for like 10 minutes.
Oh,
and that's the 5.2 liter V8, correct?
Right. It's the limited Jeep Commander 2006.
We see that a lot when there's a vacuum leak on the engine, either an intake leak like an intake gasket or something like that, or a bad MAP sensor, manifold air pressure sensor. They'll go up and down that vroom, 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 because when the engine's cooler, it's on high idle, so
Right.
it's giving it more vacuum. It's giving it a vacuum leak intentionally to keep the high idle.
Okay.
But when
Right.
there's a vacuum leak and that throttle backs it down, that idle control, it backs it down, then the vacuum leak is created. So the vacuum leak is seen and it goes up, and then the engine says, no. The computer says you're supposed to be lower, so it tries to lower the idle. It does. It overcomes that vacuum leak. Then it drops, but then it says, "Oh, we're going to stall." So up it goes again, and it's and then eventually it can
Would
go
you
away.
think that it would come from any of like the cables being cut in the driver door?
No.
Anything with the sensor or anything? Because I know they said that if I change my throttle position sensor on the car, that it should run back to normal.
Maybe if it's got a bad throttle position sensor,
But
you'll
the
be able
throttle
to see
position
that.
might be saying, "Oh, I'm high. Oh, I'm low," and it might be commanding exactly what it's being done
Yeah.
because of another reaction.
Right.
We've put a lot of throttle bodies on those vehicles for this problem too, so it might have a bad throttle body, which would be causing this. The sensors are built into that throttle body, could be causing that. But no, nothing inside the car would be doing it. This is all going to be something under the hood.
I said 5.2 at the beginning, and
Show
I
that
was on the wrong generation. This is a Hemi, isn't it?
4.7.
Oh, 4.7. Okay.
4.7.
No, it's a 4.7.
Well, I
It's not
missed
fully
twice.
Hemi. I got to do a little more construction to it to make it a Hemi.
Well, don't try to make it a 5.2 for sure.
Thanks very much for the call. Good luck. Yeah, that is my car does that every once in a while. It just at a stoplight, it'll just kind of rev up and bounce a little, and then it goes away after I drive it for a while.
Well, yeah, and that's to be expected a little bit with the intake setup you have in your car. Without it being stock, it's like
It's
anytime you
searching
build
a
a
little
race
bit.
car, you're
Yeah.
going to have some things that they're getting better, and people fine tune them, but a lot of them you just deal with the roughness.
I just tell people it's performance. It's ready to go. It's
got a big-
bucking.
It's got a big cam
Yeah,
or two.
it's ready. Let's go. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Brett. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Brett, what can we do for you?
Yeah, I just had a generic question for you on diesel fuel. I've been listening to you guys for years now and pretty faithful about making sure I get gas at a top tier station. But I was filling up my diesel the other day and I noticed it didn't have top tier. They have gasoline, but not top tier diesel. Going on the website, it's not even a thing that I can find. Is there a different rating system for diesel fuel?
Yeah, they'll have what they call premium diesel, and they'll have regular diesel. And the premium diesel is going to be regular diesel, but it's the additives they put in it, cetane boosters, and also cleaners that are put in there, and lubrication in order to keep the fuel better for your injector pump and the injectors and things. Now, there's got to be a lot of politics involved in this, because to me, if they take the sulfur and the lubrication additives out of the diesel fuel for emissions, right? Let's make them cleaner. But then a company can add in fuel additives in order to get them to be good for the vehicle. So now everybody's running these fuel additives. I don't know what the emissions levels are of a dry, plain diesel fuel versus somebody who's either put additive in the tank themselves or a fuel purchased with it. If this dry fuel puts out 0 and then fuel with additives put out 10, what did the original fuel with the sulfur put out? I mean, there's so many politics involved in that. Sometimes it's like these trucks when you put the def on them. All right, this truck got this many miles per gallon, or burned this many gallons of diesel over this many thousands of miles. If we put the diesel exhaust fluid in it and choke it down with emissions, now let's say we've reduced our fuel economy by 25%. If we've reduced it by 25%, well, they said, well, we've cleaned up the emissions, but now we're having to put 25% more fuel in it to go the same amount of miles. So
We have more of less emissions.
So yeah. So at 125%, if we burn 125 gallons instead of 100 gallons, do we create the same emissions with burning 125 gallons of fuel that are cleaner?
Yeah, what's the
as
net
we do
total?
at dirtier at 100? So I think there's a lot of that.
Things that make Russ go,
Things that make us go, Yeah, those things. So for you, though, me personally, I kind of double dip it. I purchased the fuel that says premium at the pump, and there'll always be a sticker there when it says premium of what they put in it typically. It'll say like with lubricator, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I purchased that, but then I put my Justice Brothers additive in the fuel tank every time I fill it up to protect it. Because I really don't know exactly what I'm getting, but the premium fuel is typically for us about 4 cents more a gallon. So I'm like, I'm going for that. I don't know what I'm getting in either one. Maybe I'm getting nothing out of it, but it makes me feel good.
And there's a lot of places in rural America where if you're in the middle of the country, I would say for sure, you can probably find a local station that's connected to agriculture, and they will have their own cocktails that they bring in to the region and sell.
Which helps. And a lot of it's biodiesel too, which lubricates.
So you can talk to them and say, hey, what's in your fuel? And they'll tell you that this is specifically what this fuel is, and it's used across these stations in this area. And that's where I think that's where you really get your premium fuel, because they're bringing in good stuff for their ag clients, and they bring alongside of it their on-road diesel fuel.
You say you put it in every tank? Do you do it because I try and do the ballpark thing where I'm like, well, I did it last time and then I went to half a tank and then I filled it. So now if I go to like half a tank, I can put it in.
Most of the time I'm filling up my diesel at about a quarter tank, somewhere around there, quarter tank, sometimes less, because my gauge I still have 6 gallons left when it says empty. So when it hits around a quarter, I did that on purpose because I ran out a couple times. So I moved my gauge. When it says full, it's right on F. It used to be past it, like some cars do.
Yeah.
I put it right on F, and then I ran it out when it was on empty, so I knew how many gallons were left, because I had to have, my wife didn't.
I find myself, now that we have a new gas station right next to my house that sells really good baked goods too, I fill my tank a lot more. I'll go in and get...
Is it a quick start?
Yeah.
So you went for a half tank rule now instead of a...
Yeah, just by mood.
The Buc-ee's of the North.
Yeah.
Mini Buc-ee's.
I just, when I feel... it's my own tank that needs a little fill up there, not just my gas tank. 866-594-4150. Let's see if we can get this in quick. Larry, you're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you? Got about a minute and a half. Is that going to be enough time?
Okay, I think so. I'll make it quick. I got a 98, 99 Chevy Tahoe with a 6.0 in it, and the former owner apparently took it upon himself to cut up. It has no catalytic converters, apparently. I'll double check on that. But it also has a cold air induction. And it seems to be a little lacking in performance and gas mileage and stuff, but Tahoes are kind of famous for that. But I was thinking of chipping it. And I was just wondering if that's going to screw up the central processing computer or whatever.
Well, here's the thing. With a 98 Tahoe, if they're famous for having fuel mileage issues, if the converter's been removed and the intake's been changed, because it changes airflow. So if legally you're supposed to have all that stuff on there, blah, blah, blah. Disclaimer. Anyways, now find a custom tuner that tunes these vehicles. They'll be able to tune it, and it should bring back some of your fuel economy and also give you more power too, because it's going to be a tuning issue that's going on because if airflow has been altered majorly from factory with that air intake and the exhaust.
And that's for a 98 or 99 with a 5.7 in it.
Yep.
If his is a little newer and he said 6 liter, then you got the LS version and you can get a little more opportunity to do some things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something to be aware of.
Larry, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. That'll do it for this hour of the Under the Hood Show. The Under the Hood Show is brought to you by Sturdivants. We'll be back with Hour 2 in just a couple minutes. 866-594-4150.
You're listening to the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show with the Motor Medics, Shannon Nordstrom and Russ the Super Tech Evans. Shannon is an ASE engine and parts specialist, and Russ is an ASE Master Certified Technician with extensive factory drivability training. Join the Motor Medics for fun and free automotive advice with real-world solutions to everyday automotive problems. The Under the Hood Show is heard weekly on this and other great radio stations across the U.S. Find out how you can participate in the show by visiting underthehoodshow.com.
With Russ Evans, this is Shannon Nordstrom, thanking you for tuning in to the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show. Have a great day, and remember, PTLA.
The opinions heard on this program, based on the many years of experience of Russ and Shannon, are offered for entertainment value only and as a guide to your repair needs. No claim to repair or cause is given or implied. Always consult with your own certified technician and follow all safety procedures before attempting any repair. To be a part of the show, call 866-594-4150. Under the Hood is produced by Prairie House Productions. All content is the property of Nordstrom's Automotive Incorporated and may not be used without our permission. Copyright Nordstrom's Automotive, Inc. Now, let's go under the hood with the Nordstrom's Motor Medics.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. We are glad to have you with us. Russ Evans is here to answer your automotive questions.
Thanks for joining us under the hood.
Shannon Nordstrom is here to do the same.
Welcome, hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter here to answer your calls at 866-594-4150. 866-594-4150. While the music was playing, we had a couple calls on hold waiting to talk, so let's get right to those. We'll start with Jack in California. Jack, you're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
I got a quick question for you tech guys out there. My question is, I just purchased me a OBD dongle. My question to you guys, what do you have your favorite 5 that's on the budget that would at least help us guys out, that's on the entry level?
For a scanner?
Yes.
Well, the ones that I've seen,
We probably haven't personally experienced all of them that are out there. There's a lot of options.
Like ones that we use the Autel scanners in our shop, as well as we have Snap-on and General Motors and all that, Toyota, all those things like that. But for entry-level scanners and a little higher up, we have some Autel. We've actually got 3 different Autel ones, from a plug-in Bluetooth for a phone that was like $50-$60.
Yes.
All the way up to their higher end one, which was several thousand, that does a lot of scanning. And it seemed for us, basic scanning stuff you can get by with a Autel scanner that's in the $500 to $1,000 range, because you've got updates available on there. There's other things you can use as well to get. It depends on what you're trying to.
Yeah, I think
gain.
Jack, you're asking as a consumer, just something that you can read your codes with and not necessarily get too deep into it.
Correct. It's just like they have a dongle called Fix, something similar to that.
Yeah, you can. So you can use those. You can use anything that's Bluetooth that plugs into the phone. They've gotten so sophisticated with a lot of these. Now, there's a difference between OBD2 codes, reading generic OBD2, and factory, reading factory that are vehicle-specific codes. Because if it's vehicle-specific, you may not be able to get into the vehicle at all. So like the newer Ram trucks, you cannot get into that without a subscription. Good news is the subscription currently is about $50 a year, and that will allow you to use any scanner that's registered to that subscription to read those codes. So if the scanner's capable of reading them, but it says you don't have a subscription, you've got to get the subscription to do that. But at least you don't have to pay per vehicle like you do with some stuff. But more and more manufacturers will be going to that. They have to give you the access to information, but it doesn't say it has to be free. It has to be affordable. And at $50 to access all the cars in their network,
That's pretty affordable.
It's pretty affordable when the scanner updates are over $1,000 a year.
Yeah.
We're paying monthly. We're paying over $100 monthly per scanner to keep them current. But it's nice because it downloads while we sleep. It downloads the new update, and it seemed like every year, but every year it's like, oh, you need to get the new update. You get the new update, and the cars were still 3 or 4 years behind. And there's more and more people running a brand new car out of warranty within the 12 months. You see cars all the time, 3 or 36,000 mile warranty, and they've got 50,000 miles on it in 7 months. It's out of warranty. So like right now it's 2024. I've got 2024 vehicles that are out of warranty that come in the shop. Not near as often as one that's 4 or
But
5
it
years
happens.
old, but they do. It's mainly trucks or Suburbans. People hauling their kids all over the country for soccer games and all sorts of stuff. It's crazy how far they expect. You know how it is with hockey, Chris. I mean, we just had, so my nephew just came to our town to play a soccer tournament. He's from Indianapolis, Indiana. He came here to play in the President's Cup soccer. I was like, you're coming where?
Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Sioux Falls for a game. I'm like, really? Yeah, me and thousands of other people.
A lot.
They expect him to drive across the country and go, or, well, you just don't get to go. But that's happening for football, soccer, all the stuff for us.
Yeah, they've created an industry of that whole youth
where
sports.
we were at, it was like, you're not driving more than, most of your games are going to be home, but you're not driving more than, on a bus, an hour and a half. 2 hours was really long. But there were so many places, but it's just, there's a lot more driving lately. So with your OBD2, yeah, I think you're fine with we went around a long way around,
Yeah.
but
you traveled a lot of miles to get back to the end of his question.
Right. We used to talk about when this kind of when the Bluetooth scanners first kind of hit, we used to talk about the cheap ones were $100 and you had to probably get one better than that to do anything. And now that if you want to get $100 scanner, Bluetooth scanner for your phone and car, that's a pretty decent scanner, probably.
I pull out that one that was less than $100 a lot on my phone.
The OBD link?
Yeah, if I just happen to be driving.
I used mine this last weekend. My son was back. He's had a car in storage. He got it out. He drove it like 100 miles and had a mass airflow sensor code come on. The car ran good. We checked it all out. I said, Riley, we're going to clear this code and we're going to see how it works. We cleared it and cleaned up the mass airflow sensors, and he drove it another 50 miles, never came back on, but that was very efficient at that point.
And you can find all sorts. Mine, when I went deep on it, it has a 0 to 60 timer.
There's
There's
a dashboard on there.
That's no good for me.
Yeah.
I don't need that.
But there's also freeze frame data and other stuff in there that can be helpful.
Yeah.
So you don't have to spend a lot of money. But Russ, you did hit a good brand name, that's for sure, because they're definitely working hard to put good product out there.
They've got some expensive ones too that they're using at some dealerships and stuff. They're
that's what they do.
They're custom tuners that they figure out how to make stuff work, and they're trying to make their market even bigger.
Jack, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Jody. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Jody, what can we do for you?
Hey, I got a 2015 F250 with an intermittent steering issue. I will leave my house, get about a mile away. It's happened a few times where I'll turn left onto a road, and then it'll want to keep pulling to the left when I straighten out. So I fight it a little bit, get it to come back, and it pulls to the right. Takes a few miles going back and forth like that till it slowly centers off, and I'm back to good again and not pulling. So what should I look for?
I would start by seeing if there's any codes in that system. More than likely they're not, if you're not getting a steering warning on the dash. They'll picture the orange steering wheel on the dash, but that really leads, a lot of that's electronic. We've had so many of those that have had rack issues on those and steering gear issues. And,
yeah, you said an F15 250. Is this like a diesel?
No, 6.2 gas, 255,000 miles.
Yeah, is it a Super Duty?
Yes.
Yeah, then you got Super Duty with a gearbox, but there's still electronic variable orifice steering to control the pressure on that, if I remember right on that one. They just have issues on the ones that are dependent on the truck. If it's the work truck type where you just have you've got a gearbox and you got a pump and that's it. More than likely the problem is in the pump. How many miles are on it?
255,000.
255. It's possible you've got a ball joint that's binding up, so when you turn it, it's not allowing it to come back. But we've just seen so many issues with gearboxes internally having problems like that because they've got a flow control valve built into them. So when you start moving the wheel one way, it gives assist but the wheels can't push themselves back. It's built that way so it won't fight it out of your hand, turn it the other way. But could definitely be the gearbox.
If you brought it into the shop, and said, "Hey, I'm going to pay you for some diagnosis," the first things you would do would be what, Russ?
Well, we'll look to see if it's got electronics on it. If it doesn't, then we don't have to worry about scanning codes at all. And then the next thing is check condition of the fluid pressure, make sure that's accurate. We get it up in the air and sweep the wheels back and forth by hand to make sure that they turn freely without any binding. And then we'd try it on the ground. We'd try to turn the wheels back and forth and see where the binding, because it may have a bind when they're on the ground under load, but not up in the air. Different things to check. We'd probably even try to check it on the ground first before we raised it, in case that we raise it and then it comes out of it. It's fine.
Yeah.
We put it on the ground. We're like, oh, it's working now. You just got to try to duplicate that same symptom to find.
Is this a 4-wheel drive?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems to do it worse after a rain, and it sits overnight during the rain. Next morning, it seems to.
Well,
do it
if
worse.
it does that, it could definitely be a joint, a front axle joint, or a ball joint. If you've got
Super duties with that many miles, you more than likely are ready to rebuild some stuff in the front end.
Yeah, the U joints in the end of those axles, they will bind up, and if they're in the right position, they'll be really tough to turn or straighten out.
Because you're still working with a solid front axle on there, and the ball joints, they eventually they get pretty rough.
Jody, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you.
Be sure to visit our website for news, contests, and previous shows at underthehoodshow.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to get back under the hood with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Jimmy. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Jimmy, what can we do for you?
Well, I got a 93 F-150 5.0 engine. And I go down the road, just cruising along good. I might go a couple hundred miles. All of a sudden, transmission kicks out of gear. And then it wraps up, and then it comes back in again. It just slams you. So is it the ECM, or do I got a bad wire somewhere?
No, it's really, there shouldn't be anything that can cause that to go into neutral
Other than
electronically.
Other than inside the transmission.
Yeah, fluid pressure problem. I would definitely pull the pan off and see what that filter looks like. Make sure it's still connected. We've had a few of these.
Well, I changed the fluid in it.
And did you take the
changed
pan
the
off?
fluid in a couple times. Yes.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you.
How did the
flushed
fluid
it.
look when the first time?
It wasn't bad. It had about maybe 80,000 miles on it at that time.
Oh, pretty low
Yeah,
mileage,
it looked
but nice
bad.
low mileage truck.
And now it's got like 130, I think.
Yeah, there shouldn't be anything electronically that can cause that. It had to be more something mechanical in the valve body or a pump issue with that. But typically, if a pump's going to lose pressure like that, it's going to stay down. It's not going to come back, and come back like that with the valve that's in there.
You got a push button on the end of your shifter?
Yep. It's overdrive, yeah. Push button.
Okay.
Yeah, AODE.
AODE. Yeah, so there is some electronics to it, but it should not be the type that would cause it to.
Yeah, not E4OD. But the way that's set up is electronic it's automatic overdrive with the electronic overdrive in it. So it should not. 93. It shouldn't come out of gear like that unless it's got a fluid pressure inside. Unfortunately, that's going to be one of those things where a transmission shop's going to have to get it fixed. They're probably going to have to tear it down and just go through it and see, freshen it up, make sure all the valves are working correctly, make sure that there's nothing that's worn out in there. They'll inspect the clutches and things like that, put a seal kit in it and put it back together to do it. But there are some of those things where depending on how they're set up electronically, the only way to fix it is to tear it down and investigate.
If that happened to have an E4OD in it, which is, I thought that option was only available in the 5.8 liters in the half tons.
Not on a 302.
Not on a 302 5.0.
Not on a 93.
If it did happen to have that and we're just missing that, then you could get into wiring or position switch or something that is going awry.
If it's trying to apply solenoids that are not supposed to be applied. That can happen.
But what we think you have for a transmission, I'm pretty sure we're right. It could not be commanded electronically to have happen.
Okay. Does that help you out there, Jimmy?
Yeah, it does. Because, man, like I said, you might go 100 miles, 200 miles, won't do it, and then all of a sudden does it. And it'll do it quite often. You don't want to have your cruise control on and it does it, because that motor will wrap up right now, and then she'll slam in gear. And
we talked about that on an earlier call, actually, with some new trucks that do have electronics that are dropping into first gear, and then we referenced some GM cars that had done that with the cruise control on also when we talked about that. So the challenge is real. And just, we were sitting there just having a little mind challenge, what transmission would be and what. If you're ever wondering what transmission your vehicle has and there's a choice, like one of the simplest things people can do, nowadays you can get on the web and you can maybe check by VIN number and find different things out. But the good old pan gasket pictures in Google Images, look up the year of your vehicle and say transmission pan pictures, and you'll see the gasket picture, and they're shaped differently.
Okay.
Like where the number of bolts that go in are different to hold the pan on. They might have a servo that hangs down in the pan that gives it a different bump. But nowadays there's so many images out there, like even to find out what front axle you have in your Jeep. I mean, you can look at a picture and compare off of a few, and you can find out pretty quick that, oh no, I don't have that. I'm getting all worried about this, and I don't even have that kind. Mm-hmm. But the Google Images take a picture of your cover, and you can do an image search even.
Yeah, good point. 866-594-4150. Let's go to Pennsylvania and talk to Don. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Don, what can we do for you?
Hey, I got a 2002 Volkswagen Jetta 2.0, and it started overheating one day when I left it idle. And I drove it home. The next day, I got back out. It started it up, and it immediately showed the overheating symbol on the dashboard. But the temperature gauge was all the way down to nothing. So I thought that was just maybe a goofy thing that happened. So I drove it to work. When I got back home, shut it off, felt both of the hoses, upper and lower hoses. They were not, there's no pressure in them. Is that the water pump shot?
No, I mean, that might be perfectly fine. The reason that you build, as the engine warms up, if it's got the proper amount of coolant in it, the radiator cap or the pressure cap, depending on what type of system they call it, different things. But either way, the cap on that is supposed to keep the pressure limited at a certain area. Typically, it's going to be, let's say, around 14, 16 pounds, some of them 18, 19, 21. But it keeps pressure in there, but it also is meant for vacuum, so that when it gets above that level, coolant will pass out into the overflow tank, and when it gets below, it will pull coolant back in. Now, with a system that has just a surge tank on it and no overflow, they still put a pressure cap on them, but it maintains, it just keeps it from getting past a certain point, and then it keeps the hoses from collapsing by allowing a vacuum in when it cools off. So if you've got a car that the hoses have zero pressure in them when the engine's off or they're flat, a lot of times the cap is bad. And that's why it's important whenever you're flushing coolant on a vehicle, either test or replace the radiator cap. And I see so many cars that have not had that done. People will come in and say, I just had my coolant flush, so I'm sure it's fine, but my hoses are flat. One of our
that is such a weird thing, by the way, to someone who doesn't think about that. I mean, it seems so weird that would be.
One of our former employees from our auto recycling side came into our shop with his Ram 2500 and said, they told me my head gaskets are out and it's overheating. And he says, I keep adding coolant to it. And I looked at the truck, opened the hood, and I looked and I said, well, gee, you got a problem with your radiator cap. What do you mean? I said, you need a new radiator cap. What's that have to do with it? It's like, you're pushing coolant out, but it's not pulling any back in. See your overflow bottle? Yep, it's full. So it's spilling on the ground. Go get yourself a cap, fill it up, let me know what happens. So I took the cap loose. We put the right amount of coolant in it, left it loose a little bit. He went to the store, bought a cap, and didn't have to pay $4,000 to put head gaskets in it. I saw him 2 months later. He goes, thank you. It's worked perfect ever since. It was just a radiator cap. And when we've had our interviews and we've talked to Motorrad, our partner, they specialize in electronics and engine management controls, but they're really big in cooling systems as well. Thermostats, closure caps, very important. They will tell you, you flush that coolant, you check or replace that cap. Preferably replace it, because not just because they sell them, but because if a cap is good today, it might be bad tomorrow if it's already 15, 20 years old. So do it. I mean, look at this. He could have if they would have put an engine in that truck or put head gaskets in it, they still would have had this problem and said, I guess we better put a cap on it. Oh, we fixed it. Give me the $4,000.
Or they would have been calling saying, your work is terrible and your engine is bad.
Right.
It's doing the same thing.
Or they burn it up because they do run it out of coolant. So, yeah, thermostat and cap.
Don, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
If car repair was cheap, you wouldn't need us. We're Under the Hood.
866-594-4150. That's the number to reach us here at the Under the Hood Show. You can watch the Under the Hood Show on our YouTube channel, and if you subscribe and join the Hoodie Fan Club at underthehoodshow.com, you could win a hoodie.
Like Jeanette Bodine, congratulations from all of us here at the End of the Hood Show and our friends over at Universal Technical Institute and Berkeley One Classics, celebrating 50 years of protecting you, your key to collector car insurance.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Grant. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Grant, what can we do for you?
Hey, guys. I'll explain my situation real quickly. I coincidentally live in Sioux Falls. We have an office in Lenexa, Kansas, and I've been driving my 2018 GMC back and forth. So I want to buy a little car to flat tow. So occasionally I'll need my truck in Kansas. Occasionally I'll need my truck here. And so I looked into Ford Focus and Ford Fiesta with the CV transmission.
Ooh.
And supposedly this is the preferred car that motorhome people pull behind their rigs. So I looked at the manual the other day, and it said only tow it a maximum of 50 miles at a top speed of 30 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? So is that true, or what the heck?
I think they have a disconnect axle in the front of them when they're pulling this. So they make some disconnect axles. You pull the CV shafts out of the front of the car, and you put in a different type of axle, which allows you to flat tow them. Now, I could be wrong. You may find you can go to the forums for RV towing, for flat towing. There's tons of them, Facebook groups, all sorts of stuff, and see maybe somebody just towed one of these cars, certain model, behind their motorhome for 10,000 miles and went, well, I've been doing it. It worked fine. And then other people tried it and went, it works just fine. And that would be great. If people have proven it, why not just do it? But if they also say, oh, yeah, I burned mine up. I burned mine up on my first trip across the country.
I remember Russ Tinsley, he had a Saturn he pulled behind, but he had disconnect axles on there.
Right.
Behind their pusher motorhome back in the day.
That's when we talk about that, like towing forums and other forums, my general experience with the internet is that it's filled with idiots. So how do you vet that stuff?
Right. You can weed them out if you go to the forum and it says flat towing, and you ask that you join the group and you ask the question, can I tow my Ford Fiesta behind my motorhome without doing anything to it? You will get genuine responses like, yes, you can do it. I've been doing it with no modifications for 4 years. It works perfectly. And then you'll get well, I've got one of those and I think it can probably work. And then you'll have some moron that goes, well, I got a Jeep I tow and you just can't do it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's like, that is not a Ford Fiesta.
Right.
What do you? You're right, Chris. There are a lot of really crazy people, and you've also got to watch out. You can read into it because you'll see somebody who is totally lying to you that does not own one of those cars. That's just saying, "Oh, sure, you can." I could make it sound good. I could say, "Oh, yeah, you can tow behind it because that transmission automatically disconnects when you pull it. It won't be a problem on your model Fiesta at all." And I don't own one. I've never tried it. Don't know anything about it, but they're saying it. So if you look and you see 4 or 5 or a dozen people that say, "I tow with this. This is where I've been," you can sort them out and figure out what's going on. The other place is, I believe, some of the camping sites. Camping World has a tow rating guide I think it goes back to 2014. They're about 10 years, and then they drop off. So next year they'll drop. It'd be 2015 and up. But look at their tow rating. I think they also had some different cars that can be used for flat towing or dinghy towing, they call it. If you look in your owner's manual, it'll say dinghy towing and things like that. But some of the owner's manuals, they just don't want you towing for whatever reason, and they just blanket say I think if you're a Ford executive and you're like, should we say they can tow with this?
Yeah.
No, because
don't put it in print.
We didn't sell the car for tow,
Yeah.
so just tell them no, and then they can figure it out for themselves. It's better than us saying, "Oh yeah, you're fine," and then there's a problem with braking or wheel bearings or something like that. But I have seen, when I look around, I see a lot of different vehicles behind getting towed, and I'm curious. I'm surprised at the number of Suburbans, full-size Suburbans you see behind motorhomes. Isn't that weird?
I see some stuff sometimes, and I'm looking. I'm like, are they supposed to do that?
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anything?
I do that often, actually.
Is there anything Grant could get that's cooler? That is, like a motorcycle or?
I've seen a number of Mini Coopers behind these things, which is, and then there's also the possibility, if a car that small, you could definitely put it on a trailer, get the thing completely off the ground.
So what's your opinion of that CV transmission, like on a 2018 Ford Focus? Is that a good transmission, or
we have
prone to problems? Or?
Well, the 18
has
got
problems.
Isn't that 18 Focus where they had the dual clutch transmission?
Yeah, and we've had a ton of dual clutch failures, and then the CVT transmissions, we've had a few, but not near as many as dual clutch failures in those transmissions. They were dual clutch. They had problems right out of the factory when they were brand new. They had so many. They just felt so different.
And they had people complain because they thought there was something wrong with them.
Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Look, drive this other one. And sometimes the other one they were driving was just as bad. It was brand new, and there was something wrong with it. But there's just, I don't know. I'd be fine with it. I guess you kind of.
So to solve the problem, my second question was, any car with a manual transmission, you can flat tow, because I just looked at a 2018 Kia Forte with a manual transmission, and when I looked in the owner's manual, it said tow truck or dollies. I was like, what?
Well,
so is it your opinion that any manual transmission you can flat tow?
You definitely cannot, because some manual transmissions, they pump and sling fluid around by the input shaft spinning, which is run by the engine, not by the drive shaft spinning in the rear of it. So you can damage that transmission. The front will still be turning a little bit.
Because you're not getting the lubrication it was designed for.
So it has to be running. So if you've got a 4-wheel drive that you can put into neutral, typically the pumps in the transfer cases are all driven by the rear output shaft, and they will pump fluid around. Right. So you just got to do some looking. But again, if I had a vehicle,
I have a
I would
question
not flat tow it. I would put it on a tray. I would get a small vehicle. Yeah. If a big vehicle like a Suburban, I'm going to flat tow it. But if I have if I have a small car like a Fiesta or a Mini or something, it's going on an aluminum trailer, a little tiny aluminum trailer, because all I have to do is drop the ramps, drive the car off, and go. I don't have to disconnect the lighting connector, the brake connector. Some states require brakes on the car if it's being flat towed. And if you pull through a state and a state trooper pulls up next to you and looks at your trailer hitch as you're driving down the interstate, and they see you've got a tow bar hooked up and you've got one lighting connector and no brake wire on there, they may pull you over and say, you cannot continue in this state because you have no active brakes on your vehicle. And they make a active brake controller that applies the brake in the car behind you. I don't know if it's in.
And you can always, I mean, there's some people that are, you'll see just with the two-wheel dollies to get the drive wheels off the ground and let the rear axle
and
just
those
roll.
are easy to unload as well.
And they're easy to unhook and just hopefully have a place to put it where nobody steals it.
The good news is there is definitely these answers are there and those vehicles are there. But you just gotta. Is there a reason you're looking at those two specifically, or just in general?
Well, I specifically want a flat tow because I want to just I want the truck in Sioux Falls this weekend or the car in Sioux Falls, so then I just hook on and go. I don't have to get a dolly. But no, the Ford Focus and the Ford Fiesta are supposed to be like the cars that everybody's getting for this behind motorhomes.
If they are, they must be using them.
The owner's manual
Must be a forum out there.
But the owner's manual contradicts that.
They will,
They
like
say that.
I said, they'll cover themselves. CYA, they'll say, nope, can't do it when you can. There's a lot of things that the manufacturer does that because they're not selling it as a car to be towed, so they can just say, no, we don't do that. I see a lot of stuff like that.
Do you ever longboard, like skateboard, or you ever had a Segway?
No.
Okay, just checking. I mean that. Well, because they got those powered ones. There's a guy that goes past the radio station every morning on a one-wheel powered.
Oh, one of the What are they called?
Oh, a one wheel.
Yeah.
My grandson has a one wheel.
Yeah, you can do that, Grant.
Boy, baby, you crash one of them, hang hard if you crash. Ooh, but they're neat.
Get some tattoos, grow beard, and you're right in this thing. I mean, this is no problem. I see it all the time.
He ruins it with the Focus or the Fiesta, though.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
My car does that thing. You know, that thing. Under the Hood has the answer you're looking for.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Alan. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Alan, what can we do for you?
Well, I have a 1970 MG Midget. Or it might be an Austin Healey Sprite. Who knows? Who cares? It's got an MGB big brake kit on it. And when I got the new calipers for the front end, one of the calipers have bad threads where you put the banjo fitting in. So I'm real hesitant about running a thread chaser through there because they are new and I hope they're under warranty. But I have the old Lockheed ones that came with the car when I bought it. And I can put air to them. I can get one piston to pop, one piston where you put the air to pop out, but the other one doesn't move. Now, can I possibly take a C-clamp and back the one that came out in, put air back to it? Would that pop the other side loose, possibly?
Yeah, it might just be stuck. You should be able to,
yeah.
If you can grab the front of it without grabbing the boot, you might be able to turn it back and forth and get it to pull out a little bit. But if you can't, just put a C-clamp on the one that does move to hold it about halfway in and then just put some air to it and push it out. You cannot apply too much air to it because you would never find an air compressor to do that. We're talking about more than 1,000 pounds of brake fluid pressure. You're never going to get that with air, maybe 250 if you're super lucky and get a compressor that big, but not many around. But,
interesting.
Yeah.
But you could try it. But I don't know if that thing is going to leak or not. They leak when they had those on airplanes. I mean, they were leakers. But that caliper, if you haven't touched it and it doesn't look like the threads are all ripped up in it, definitely get a hold of the company and say you want another one. Say I've tried to thread the bolt in by hand and it will not go in there because the threads are not good. If they see that they're chewed up because you've tried to clean them out or tried to run a bolt, they're just going to say, nope, you ruined it. So when we have something come in like that, I tell the guys, take your brand new bolt that came with it, try to put it in by hand. If it does not go all the way in and out by hand, just don't touch it. Let's just send it back and get another one right away because it's not something you want to mess with, having an issue with.
Do we want to check the color on this one?
I was debating.
Well, it depends on whether it's a Healy or a Sprite or what it is. If it's the little
one way or another, Berkeley would still cover it.
Right. I have a
yeah, they'll cover it no matter what.
I
They've
have a
been doing
question.
it for 50 years.
Alan,
They've had
don't tell us what color it is yet. But I have a question. Is it in good shape?
This is the second time you've asked a qualifying question,
Well,
and you,
I'm
you don't
helping-
let me do it when
I'm
I
helping
try
you.
to.
Is it in good shape? Has it been babied its whole life or not?
How would he know?
It's a retired F production SCCA car out of Ohio.
Yeah, it's been babied like your Pontiac, Chris.
Okay. Then I know what
So
color
that makes
it
a difference in the color.
Sports
I'm
Car Club
going
of
yellow.
America.
is. Yellow? Russ, what do you think?
It's black and it's got cracked paint on it because it's been painted like 8 times.
I'm saying it's red for that reason. What color is it?
Russ, you win.
Okay.
It's
Black
been
and-
orange. It's been green.
And now it's black.
Now black with fiberglass fender flares and big
Oh.
rivets and
Oh, so we
Oh,
definitely
it-
don't know if it was a Healy or a Sprite.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, well, Berkeley One Classics wants to give you a hoodie because you've got a classic.
Mhm.
That's cool.
No
Those are-
purchase necessary, by the way. Stay
No,
where you are,
no,
Alan. I'm going
no.
to put you on hold, and we're going to get some info from you and send you out a hoodie. But you get the hoodie no matter what, even if you don't have to like switch over. Although that would be a neat
Better yet.
incentive. Because if it were babied, if it were really nice, it would be green.
Would it?
Yeah, I
it
think
would be
so.
orange.
Yeah, I think.
No, I don't know what color it would be.
For some reason, I know where your brain's at on this,
Yeah,
Chris.
right? Doesn't it seem in the interior
Like a British green that they
with a tan interior?
that it was.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was the Cruiser.
Right. I mean,
You sure you're not thinking about a Morgan?
for sure. I mean, that could be it. But the MGs my uncle had one, and I was like, "What? I want one of these." And he's like, "No, you don't." I was like 8 or 9, and he had one. I thought it was the coolest, and he did a good job of convincing me I didn't want it ever. And he's right. He was right. It reminds me, my brother. We were just talking about this. My brother had a Fiat Spider that he bought from a teacher at school, and he paid $300 for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget this. This was one of the big.
It was in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 81, 82.
Because in like 84, 85, I bought a number of like Triumph TR7s,
Yeah.
a couple MGs, and they were all like $300 to $350.
Yeah,
And they were like, they ran okay, but they needed some help.
and he was at a stoplight, turning right, and he thought the car ahead of him went,
Uh-oh.
and he started to pull out, and he slipped off the clutch and just jumped into the car in front of him.
Oh no!
And totally
Destroyed it, didn't he?
destroyed it. It looked
Yeah.
like it hit a brick wall at 80 miles an hour, and the person he hit was a friend. It was a baseball. He was coming from baseball practice. Didn't even know he'd hit him. That's how light he had hit him, and destroyed this car. And this, I'll never forget this. My brother's genius idea was just to drag it home and put it in front of the house or in the backyard. And that was it. He just brought it home, put it in the backyard, and then went back to school for baseball practice. And what do you think happened?
Yeah.
My mom came home from work and saw James Dean's car in the yard, and she freaked out because it looked
bad.
It was horrible.
They are so thin. Those were, you remember, Shannon, you could put your foot, if you rested on the bumper, the little impact bar, you could push on it and bend the bumper.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you would bump into something with it,
Yeah,
and
you
it
didn't
would
wanna
twist the
stand on
bumper.
'em.
So you'd grab it and go, and you'd twist it back. You know, my front bumper was bent on my 74 Volkswagen. I just grabbed a hold of it with 2 hands and I pulled it up, and it's straight. So you bump one of those into a wall or something at 2 miles an hour, it's gonna really bend.
It was not a 5 mile an hour or 7.5 mile an hour bumper.
No, not at all. No.
A lot of those weren't back then. They were just so.
You know, on the call just before this, Grant had called in about flat towing.
Mm-hmm.
And during the break, I jumped on to Facebook and I just put in flat tow. And I learned 2 things. One, confirming what Russ said, there's a bunch of groups out there.
Sure.
And the one I jumped on was flat tow vehicles for sale.
Okay.
And there was 2,500 members.
Okay.
and you could see something for sale, and then 42 comments. I just looked quick, about, well, that one works good for this.
Sure.
There was obviously a few experts and a few people with opinions. The other thing I learned is that they have an acronym, and it was used regularly in the posts as I browsed through. And it was TOAD, TOAD, looking for a toad,
Okay.
TOAD.
Sure.
So I don't know that it was even an acronym. I think they've probably just called him a
yeah,
toad.
I like it.
Yeah, so I need a toad.
Mm-hmm.
And there was people looking for a toad in the Panhandle of Texas. There was people looking for a toad in Yuma, Arizona. I did not see anybody looking for a toad in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So maybe Grant needs to join and change that.
866-594-4150.
So I'm kind of surprised that over the past couple days, I haven't had at least a dozen calls of people needing engines in their cars because of the rain. There's been so much flooding within 500 miles of
Ridiculous
this area.
flooding.
It's been all across the country, and some places are super dry, and they're like, what is going on? I wish we had a little of the rain, but we've had so much. Like, we had like close to 15 inches where we're at. Down south of us, they had like 21 inches, and other places had even as little as 7 or 8. But 7 or 8 is like 2 months worth.
And normally we get an inch or two rain.
Yeah.
We had 6 or 7 inch rain.
We got a place over in Minnesota, not just a couple hours from here, that has rained so much. If you look up the Rapidan Dam on there, you'll see that this dam is a monster, and it goes down like a couple 100 feet. So the dam's not going anywhere, but it is completely washed out around it. It's just eating away and taking away houses and businesses and stuff. But the point is, people drive into water that should not. If you see a car in front of you, let's say you see a dozen cars drive through the water in front of you, and it's up as deep as the hubcaps, let's say, the bottom of the wheel. And you're like, oh, I'm fine. No, they may all be fine. Even if the roads, you've determined it's solid and the water's not flowing.
And the road's not washed
they're
out.
going through, they don't have a barricade up, but this is touching the bottom of everybody's bumper.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're the one that has the air intake at the lower part of your bumper.
Or you
and they
catch
all
a splash from the other vehicle where it makes a little wave.
wave, and it
Your
sucks it
vacuum
in.
that you're driving.
If everybody, I think, has used a wet dry vac at home at least once, and what happens when you touch that 5 horsepower, 3-inch hose vacuum to water, it just immediately, boom, and it sucks up 5 gallons of water in seconds. Your car is a several hundred horsepower shop vac with a bigger air intake. It can suck up way more water, way faster, and it only takes about a quarter of a cup to destroy an engine because they're so tight inside. You get it in there, it hydrolocks it. At the minimum, you might bend some valves or bend a piston, a connecting rod, or break a piston.
Internal damage that's going to cause you to replace the engine or take it apart at a minimum.
Stay out of the water. But I'm really surprised we haven't had a ton of people. There will be.
We're starting to see total losses coming like crazy.
In my day job on the radio, we were talking about, they made a big deal about the turnaround, don't drown. And I wanted to point out to people that that's very true, but more than that, don't go in, even if you know the road is there and there's no issue safety-wise, don't drive into water like that because, it takes a second for you to destroy your vehicle.
And if you have gotten water inside your car and it did not,
like if it's parked in a flood,
sitting, or you got some into your carpet area, just like home, you want to get that stuff out. You want to get it out because there are modules underneath on most all these cars down in harm's way, and if you can get at them right away and clean them out and disconnect power and clean modules, you can rescue a lot of that stuff.
We were in water that was about 4 inches deep this last weekend, and we drove through it slow in a 4-wheel drive big truck, and everybody else was too. But somebody was driving a little Kia Sportage in the right side, which they said
deep side.
It was closed, but they were driving through deeper than bottom of the door deep, and when they got to the stop sign, water was running out the doors.
That'll do it for this hour of the Under the Hood Show. Until next time, you can find us at underthehoodshow.com.
And we're back.
The
Just
after
like
show.
that. Yeah, so we're driving through this
Did it
water.
keep going?
Yeah. It wasn't bumper deep, but it wasn't like over the bumpers in the intake, but it was above the bottom of the doors by a few inches. They were wading through it, and it was somebody that, driving it, I wasn't sure. They were very young and didn't really look like they weren't sure of whether they should be driving or not there, and they were just kind of like looking around, and it had a barricade on the right lane, but it was weird. It was across the right lane, not across the left lane, and we were at a big it was 41st and Louise. It was a big intersection.
Which would leave you to think that maybe there's a problem in
yeah,
the lane. So I
right
can
there.
drive in, yeah.
So she cuts in front of us just a little bit.
You just identified
into our lane and back into, well, it could have been, I don't know, but then they pulled back into the right lane after they got around the barricade. Though the barricade meant the whole, if you see a barricade and you see deep water past it, I'm thinking I'm not going to go back until it's clear. And across the intersection, it was completely closed by that store. I mean, the whole, all across Louise, if around here would know it, but picture yourself in an intersection with 6 lanes on every direction. The lanes in front of us, we had to all turn left because we couldn't go right. It was flooded. We couldn't go straight. It was all flooded. So this person goes around the barricade and stayed in that right lane, and everybody was turning left. Now it's 4 lanes going left instead of 2, but the right 2 lanes were closed. And as we got to the intersection, I look over and I'm like, hey, look, there's water running out. And I told my wife, don't do that. She's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Why? You really think? I'm like, no, but I'm saying
surprising they got through it without
they shouldn't. Yeah,
sucking
without
water in.
Well, it looked such in bad shape. It probably didn't even have an air intake on it. You know, it was probably one of those where the air box was there, but the rest of it was gone. But it was like
didn't have a snorkel running up the A-pillar.
No, but I thought, wow, that is deep. And what are you thinking? But we saw other cars that were sitting in the water at intersections. They had died, and they were small little cars. There was something you don't see very often, but I saw a 4-door Porsche hybrid sitting along the inside or the side of the highway down by
like a Panamera
down by Houston Speedway.
Oh,
they had driven through that water down there in Madison, and it was sitting on the side of it had been sitting there, and you could tell because there was dirt on the bottom of it. So why would you drive that expensive of a car? Why would you drive any car in that deep water? But they did it. And at that point, the barricades were up now, and it was past them. The water was deep. Water can come up so quick, and it does so much damage to these things. And I've seen people pull into water, and there's a sinkhole.
That's the thing.
It washes out underneath.
You can get it, like even I have a vehicle that I know the air intake is up high. It's up high under the hood.
The Honda.
The Prius, actually, has it up on the passenger side.
Yeah, the box is high. And it's got drain holes in it.
Right. But if you're in deep enough water and it comes up in a wave or, even it can get right in there.
And it can also get into the stator on that motor. If you get water to the bottom of your transmission, that electric motor that runs it, it's exposed in there, and it's not watertight. It's splash protected, but it is not watertight. It will
not intended to be submerged.
Right. No. You will destroy that thing quickly. It's not so much the engine, but the stator and the electronics, and you'll be dead in that thing.
I feel so for people that are involved in the worst of this. I talked. I mean, everybody's got a connection somewhere, so I'm not trying to be special here. But I talked to a friend of mine last night that lives in Hayward, Iowa, and his own personal residence basement filled 3 feet high on the main level of water.
Oof.
His personal residence. He has some rental homes too, and extensive damage on half of his rental homes. One of them to the point where he's actually going to hire a crane company to come in to lift the house to put a new foundation underneath it once things settle down because the walls collapsed on the foundation.
Yeah, I heard several people that are in this right now, and they've been told you open the door and the basement's full to the top, but it's dry outside now. Do not pump that water out quickly. They said lower the level a foot and wait. If it doesn't come back within 24 hours, drop it down another
Otherwise
foot.
You're going to collapse your foundation.
Wait. Yeah, if they drop it down and it does come back, you got to wait until it stops coming back. Otherwise, you have all the pressure on the outside, especially if you got a block basement. But we had one of our regular customers that has an automotive dealership that's they're retiring, closing out. That one we've done all the cars for down there.
They're in Spencer.
They lost it. 2 feet of water throughout the whole place and the whole town. It was under a couple feet of water. So he said
They're
lost
in Spencer, right?
Yeah, lost
Spencer
13 buildings down there, and nobody's got flood insurance because they don't expect floods. Houston Speedway had their annual big
High Bank Nationals.
Dirt Vision, High Bank. I mean, it was going to be a
World
big
Outlaw
thing.
Show, huge show.
One
of the biggest races in the country.
A lot of people came in. They dropped off their campers and $1 million motorhomes earlier in the week, getting ready to fly in or whatever they were doing for this thing, and they were sitting there. A lot of them didn't even know there was a river behind this place, because the last time that river had water deep enough to cause anybody even a concern was like back in 93, other than the winter. Winter, it floods every winter because you get ice jams. It just, I mean, it gets not this deep, but it gets deeper. But for the summer, nobody would have ever suspected
They've had
this.
a few events there, and they have done a lot of work to get the drainage fixed. But when you got...
But the river is a river, and the river just stayed in its
and what
banks.
happens there is my dad explained this to me, and I'd forgot that, but you got water coming from, in our area, the west side of Sioux Falls comes there, and then you got water coming down from the north, and it kind of intersects just south of there, so it'll actually back that river up.
Yep.
And so they had people that had gotten, they weren't there with their vehicles, and people that had been warned and said, hey, the river's coming up, and don't realize how fast it's going to come up. That friend of mine, this is just interesting. Like I said, everybody's got a story. I'm not trying to sound special. He is on the fire department also, and they went down and they had a meeting at the fire hall, and they said, hey, we got a problem here. This is going to be a problem. And they were comparing to previous crests, and I think he said 35 feet was a previous crest that they had compared to. And he said, I got to go. I'm going to go start sandbagging. Before we have to help everybody else, I'm going to try to get my stuff done. So he went to, I think he said his mom's house, and they sandbagged it to the same level that they had before when they've done it before. And he said once the water started moving, within 5 minutes, he said it was over.
Yeah.
It just said it rose so fast. He said he could not believe how fast that water arose because the rain was coming down so fast across such a wide area flowing into these rivers. So we've definitely got some huge challenges in this area. People that we all know, friends, businesses, residents. My friend is he's in okay shape, he said, because he's sitting okay financially, but there are people that their home is destroyed and they don't have extra resources.
Right.
And it's pretty rough.
And a lot of people just there's no flood insurance because they never need it or they can't get it. And they're like, oh, we're never going to flood here. When was the last flood? Well, 80 years ago. Well, whatever. You just don't know. Even where we're at in Garrettson, I had several people say, hi, I heard you were closed because you're flooded up. I'm like, no, we're not. They didn't even close the road where they were coming from Brandon down by the Speedway. That was past the interstate. So we had zero. It was touching the shoulder of the highway, but that's it. But then again, this is way deeper than than we've seen it.
Yeah.
And I've seen the water there deeper, but not as deep other places. It was evenly deep at every river stream crossing all the way up through our little town of Garrettson. If the rain would have kept coming and that river would have rose by another 4 feet, that entire town would have been, Shannon's house, all of it would have been underwater. Now 4 feet's a lot, but it had already come up, 10 feet from where it was, from where it normally sits in its banks, because it was up to the bridges on Highway 11 to the bottom and through that area. And then it looks like it's on a hill, but it's not that much higher. And even where we're at, where they played the soccer games a week before in Sioux Falls, I took pictures and we sent them to our nephew and said, hey, here's where you played. It was under 8 feet of water, the fields there. And it was close to the road. Another foot, it would have been completely over that interstate. So it can come and go pretty quick. And then now it's receded so fast. It's like, was it ever wet? It's amazing how fast that stuff comes through. But for that, even the regular ground, to think of 10 inches of rain dropping from the sky over a very many square mile area, you're like, a whole 5-gallon bucket of water, that's a lot that is a lot of rain. So in cars, we did have some people call and say, my carpet was wet, not engines, but my carpet's wet. Why would my carpet be wet? Was your car outside? Yeah, that's your problem. I had a guy call, thought they had an engine warranty problem because we put an engine in a few months ago. No, it was wet. And it was wet because it sat in the driveway and rained so hard, water went down the windshield, overflowed the drain at the base of the windshield, which now are covered. They used to have the grills.
Yeah.
And they're covered, so it went in and it got ignition system wet in the car. And it's like, no, it's wet. I can dry it off. I'm not going to charge you for this one, but no, this is your deal.
Let's go back. We talked about it a little bit at the end of the show, but just in general, if your car gets into water, it's sitting, it's parked, whatever, there are differences depending on, like you said, get it out and get it as dry as you can, as fast as you can. But there's differences with running water, the dirtiness of the water.
And in our area, we're talking about fresh water, but there's a lot of silt in it from the rivers and stuff off the fields around here. So it's a very silty water. And so it can get into modules and things like that and then just settle in there and leave a corrosive, conductive mess inside those modules. So if you have a car that you drove into water, sucked in water, your engine's probably done on that. You also want to check the transmission fluid to make sure it didn't stay in there long enough where it permeated into the transmission. Because if it did, you're going to want to flush that right away and get that water out of there, because eventually that'll absorb into the clutches and ruin the clutches in the transmission if you don't get it out of there as soon as possible. If the car was just sitting and water came upon it and came into it, that's when you want to get it in. If you can't do it yourself, have somebody identify, and you can usually tell by opening up like a rear door, just find out where the water line was. How deep was this water? So that you can check anything in that level before you try to use the car. So we used to do this with flood cars. Russ and I did a bunch of them back in the day in 92, 93. We've talked about that on the show before, but you would get in there and pull the modules out, physically open them up, clean them out, dry them out, as long as you didn't put power to them. Remove the power immediately, because once it has power, it'll eventually just start arcing and going after that ground circuit in the module. But if you can dry the module out, you could take a brand new computer in theory and dip it in water, pull it out, shake it out, dry it, and it's probably going to be fine. But if it was powered up, it's a whole different story.
Right.
So
if it's running water, that can be different.
Yeah, it just pushes into different places. Yeah. You got to see where the water got to.
Yep.
And if you can get everything dried out, they make bags you can hang in the cars to absorb moisture. We've taken dehumidifiers and put them inside of cars with a tube running out just to get moisture out of the car.
I remember a friend of mine lived in New Orleans, and she sent me a message saying, "Hey, my car flooded. We had water on the street." And you said the same thing. Tell her this, and then she sent me a video of the river that was running down her street, and you were like, "Oh, never mind any of that."
Well, plus it was probably brackish water with salt water in it.
Absolutely.
And that's just game over. Unless you can disinfect the car.
Right. Yeah.
It's game over on salt water typically.
Yeah, it's been really something. It's just been, and it was, for me, it was a surprise, not a surprise. It wasn't, it just happened with rain. I mean, we didn't really have like a big severe event. You know what I mean? Usually,
it was just
endless,
just rain,
hard rain.
It rained. It rained one day,
so long,
got the ground wet. A couple days later, it was pretty much dry, just some sprinkles, and then another hard rain where it was like 5 inches, and then a couple days, and then another 5 inches, and then it was raining other places, so water was flooding down from different.
And it wasn't spring; it's the middle of summer.
The good thing is, thankfully, the rain stopped when it did, because the pattern we were in, if we would have had 2 more 5-inch rainstorms like that, it would have been all over for so many people. Yeah. It just would have come. I mean, all this rain from up north all funnels down and goes. Sioux City really gets hit hard, and they got the floodwaters down there a couple days after we did, because you imagine this big wave, and it took that long to go 80 miles, and there it sat. If they would have had, and the rain wasn't coming down from the sky like it was here, but if it would have, on top of all that, it would have been even worse. So you just never know when they say those 100-year floods, but then yet I was trying to build in an area, and they said, "Oh, it's a floodplain, you can't build there." Really? And then they extended the floodplain further than what FEMA says is a floodplain, which has been extended. And we don't get a drop of water there. And you know what? It was flooded. I didn't get a drop of water, so take that, FEMA.
This just got personal.
Yeah.
But still, it's nothing. Like, you realize for me to get a drop of water in this spot means that over there would have, we talked about it touching the side of the road. It said that would have to be another 30 feet higher. And if that was 30 feet higher, our entire town basically would be underwater.
One of our customers that we work with, our outside salesman, was out and about, talking to customers, and sounds like his home was one of the homes in McCook Lake. If you look up that on the internet, just devastated the way the water came rushing through there and washed out streets, between homes, underneath homes, washed homes away.
It looked like California mudslide type of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, just
something we just don't see around here.
Yeah, everything gone, collapsed.
Yeah. It's like I said, I know there's a lot of people out there that have dealt with stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just calling out a couple of examples. If you haven't been paying attention, there's people that are in rough spots.
That water changes the course of river. It's like if you've ever taken a garden hose and sprayed the dirt on your ground and it digs a hole.
Mm-hmm.
A river with hundreds of millions of tons of water pressure rolling through. I mean, we watched it at that dam. They said, "Oh, we're probably going to lose our old house," and I thought, well, that would be a horrible thing, but it's like 300 feet away. That'll never happen. Yeah. And within 10 hours, it was gone.
Yeah, they got a video of that house getting in Mankato.
Yeah, and then their store, which is their livelihood, unfortunately, it's like 500 feet past that. It's really close to that now. So it's just the erosion, and so much of this is sand that down a few feet it turns to sand, and the water just eats that away. But I understand now why they say, the government tries to watch it's the Corps of Engineers. They try to watch really closely of what could happen and patterns that have happened over hundreds of years and water erosion and things. And they're like, yeah, we're going to try to protect this area because it could be a problem. And they don't allow you to change the course of certain drainage because it could affect other places. And then when you see something like this, you really take heed to a little bit of that. And I mean, we have enough problems here with water, but luckily we're...
The farming community has been doing a lot of drain tiling and removing of valleys of grass and trees.
That's been the modern thing.
When these rains come down, they get to the rivers quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
And so
save the cropland, yeah.
Well, it saves some cropland, but it also creates a new challenge compared to what would have been natural 20 years ago.
Oh, it fills up the river, too.
That much quicker.
It just keeps their crop from washing away, but the rivers are...
Yeah, that was the point. I think it changed the dynamic of how the rivers fill.
That's my neighborhood where I live used to get flooded.
Same thing that happens when you pave a neighborhood compared to when it was grass.
Well, that was just it. I thought of that this time because my neighborhood used to flood. There was an access point that would flood, and we would get water, and we had to pay attention to everything. And now it's changed enough that we don't get that water, but that water's it's still going somewhere.
Yeah, it's moving somewhere else.
It's right down there where they did that. Now it's at the next point down the stream there, and it was it's,
nobody wants to be below your water when it floods.
Exactly, yeah.
But the fact is, we're all below somebody's water, and most of the time.
And I think the other surprise, like I said, it's not spring, and it's been
spring-like?
Perfect up until now.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody watering their grass, or it's just been pretty good so far. And then this happened.
It's usually dry. By now the grass is turning brown if you're not watering it, and it's warmer out, but it's wet. And just like last 4th of July a year ago, it was rainy and in the 60s. And now they're talking about in like 70 and sunny, but it's supposed to be today. It's supposed to be cool here. It's supposed to be even cooler this weekend.
Yep.
Like in the 60s. It's like,
nighttime lows in the 40s and 50s.
But last summer, we had hotter weather for longer than we have in as long as I can remember. We were in the high 90s at the end, like late in the fall. As we had a life light,
Yep.
and it was like 96 degrees that day when the average temp is like 74 those days. And I'm like, what is? It's just a weird weather pattern we've been in for a while.
Well,
Protect
back to
your
your
car.
vehicles, protect your car.
Protect your car.
If it got wet, don't ignore it.
All right. Let's.
That was quite a lot.
There's a lot going on there.
Oh, I just feel for people, though. I've talked to so many people, and you try to help where you can. It's just tough stuff.
My brother sent me a picture. He's like,
Just
wow,
tough stuff.
Look at that. Has that river ever been that high on the banks? And
Just
I was
tough
like,
stuff.
It's not a river. Where the picture he was looking at was not a river. It was outside of town, and it was just a field that filled up. And it's good luck, everybody. All right, are we ready? Is that it for the after show?
I've still got my voice. Let's quit.
Any other things we need to talk about? I don't think so. All right. Click like, subscribe. We'd appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.